Thank you for 5-7 into Virginia, 73, QRZ, Whiskey 1, Delta, Echo Delta.
Hi, my name is K.Thomas, W1DED. I've been very interested in learning more about how young people are getting involved with the hobby, especially given the pull of the internet, cell phones, and TikTok. And in some conversations I had recently, I learned of Vicki Carnes, AD3I. It seems as though Vicki single-handedly has taken on the challenge of introducing young people to the hobby. She's located in South Carolina, and she's with me today. Hi, Vicki.
Well, good morning, Kevin. Single-handedly leaps from all bounds. That's not quite me, but good morning.
Well, we'll get into that. Tell us first where you or when you first had this idea about introducing young people to ham radio.
I became a ham early last year, 2021. And most people know the appeal of Parks on the Air. It's a great way to get out and get exposure to various hams, DX contesting, setting up antennas. And in doing so, I was at a local park, Andrew Jackson State Park, just down the road from me. And as I was about to put up my antenna, I saw this little small group, probably 8 or 10. I believe they were Cub Scouts, maybe just getting into the Boy Scouts, with 5 or 6 leaders. And I just stopped, tapped one of the leaders on the shoulder, identified myself, told him I was a ham about to put up an antenna and talk on the radio. Do you think the boys would be interested? And he said, oh my, yes. So they were headed toward the lake and just immediately made a J-turn and came back. And I'm one of those that I look for volunteers. So I asked one of the fellows who could handle a hammer, drill the stakes in the ground. Of course, the leaders were there with them. Who wanted to be the boss with the clipboard? You've always got one of those little guys. And these little fellows all pitched in and helped me put up a DX commander, a complement of 2, I think we had 20 meters and 40 meters. And they laid out the radios and all this, and now it was time to get on the air. And we got on the air. They were just about to have to leave. And I got on the air and I had this station, and I had contacted him before. Okay, fellas, who wants to get on the radio? And this one little fella said, I do. He got on there, and the call sign was Serbia. I don't have his call sign readily available. But I sent the boys home and their leaders home. I said, I need you guys to look on a map and see where this young fella just talked to. Because you guys put that antenna up. You young men helped me put that radio down. You guys helped me set up the battery. You guys did all of that. And just the look on their face, and they wanted more. So tapped on the leader's shoulder. I said, we're trying to reach out to these fellas. And in doing so, we ended up getting in touch with a local Girl Scout. And that's another story if you wish me to lead into, but it just clicked with me. I said that the appeal of this, and I never meet a stranger. You pass people's cross their path is what I'm trying to say, and you are to make it better for them. And if you try hard enough, they can make it better for you. You can learn from every individual whose path you cross. So I just felt like this is something I need to do and that I want to do. And I'm not bragging, I'm just good at it, and I know that. And I'm trying to reach out to others to duplicate this and bring more people on board. So it started with a handful of little Cub Scouts at a park, barely 600 feet above sea level, talking to Serbia.
Vicki, that's a beautiful story. I hadn't realized that you had them help you set up. Such a brilliant idea. Certainly when anybody in life gets to put their hands on something, but particularly in ham radio, when you actually get to use the equipment, set up the antenna, and start to ask them questions, that's 10 steps beyond what I've done in the past. When I have also done Parks on the Air activations, I use an external speaker. It usually attracts a crowd. I've had kids come over and they'll listen. Haven't had anybody who wanted to get on the air yet, but totally a different level when people have the opportunity to set up. So that's such a great idea. So I've got to ask, do you have some teaching background? Because when you talk, it sounds as though you do. Was there any teaching in your background?
Not really. When I find something that I like or that I want to learn, they say when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I think mine is almost the flip side of that now, that's been my philosophy all through life. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. If you're ready to learn. And but not really. I don't know. I've just got this thing with kids that seems to go click. I put myself down. I don't mean on their level, but I like to look at kids eye to eye, not down on them. I like to talk to them on their level, not drill down like a drill sergeant. It's like engage them, show them that they're not going to break it. That kind of thing. And it's just always worked for me.
It's a great idea. It does remind me of growing up. I had a grandfather that always trusted me with the equipment and gave me opportunities. And I learned so much on his farm because he gave me that sort of latitude.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yes, sir.
So tell me about the Girl Scouts. How did this idea progress to the Girl Scouts?
At the tail end of that little Boy Scout episode, I had met one of our club members, a relatively new, I think he used my call sign. I'd met a club member at Andrew Jackson at that same time, and he was there with his 7-year-old son, and Randy wanted to see what Parks on the Air was about. So when the Boy Scouts finished, we stayed there, and he got on the air, and his son was not interested. I think Grayson's 7 or 8. He was off to the side on his iPad or some kind of device. And after a little bit, his dad he took off on Parks on the Air. And I pulled Grayson over and I said, let me explain something to you. Come here a minute. And there was his dad sitting there on the radio. His dad had the biggest grin. It chokes me up every time I see the joy that people get in doing this. But what really... I called Grayson over and I said, look at your dad. Let me explain something to you. You see where we are. And he looked around. There's a lake. There's pine trees. We've got an antenna up. Your daddy's sitting here in the middle of a lake, and he did not call them. There's a ham radio operator in Alaska that just called your dad. The guy in Alaska is in 3 foot of snow outside. There's no electronics, there's no internet, there's nothing between him and your daddy, and that man called your daddy. Your daddy is a hero. He's sitting out here in the park asking for anyone in 3 feet of snow. Of course, the snow gets higher as I tell the story, but he was in snow. And the next thing I know, while he was sitting there, the other operator in Alaska and called, and that little boy looked at his dad like he was Superman. It was a beautiful thing. I did get a picture and did give it to Randy. But that's the same park where I go frequently. And it's just 5 or 6 miles from me. It's Andrew Jackson State Park. And I've become friends with a phenomenal park ranger. Laura Ledford is her name. And she knows what I'm doing out there. Her uncle is a ham, she thinks, up in North Carolina. And we just started talking over the months went by, and I saw something pop up about Girl Scouts love state parks. And when I saw that, I went to Laura and I said, Girl Scouts aren't the only thing that love state parks. Ham radio operators love state parks. We need to do something together. And she and I planned it. We started doing some research, found out that there was a patch the Girl Scouts could earn through the ARRL. So we delved into that, myself and our club vice president, Hillary. And we had to not modify, but take some of the high level detail. It was the ARRL kind of made it a little bit too complicated. So we trimmed it down, tweaked it, looked at it, and minimized the ARRL's program. The girls went through all of that in a 3.5-hour time frame. There were 7 volunteers there, set up. A few months later, it was September the 10th or September the 11th this year. They went through this program, got on the air. 22 girls went through the program. 22 girls got their ARRL patch. 22 girls are coming back in February for a follow-up to get them started with their licensing for ham radio. And it started a little park right down the road, and I just, like I said, I don't meet a stranger, and you'll find the strengths that the other person has had, and you simply tap them on the shoulder. I call it volunteering them. Around here they call it being Vickied. Vicki taps you on, and if you want to volunteer, do, and if you don't, I'm not going to push it. But it all started right here, this little old park down the road.
So did any of those girls in the Girl Scouts move ahead and get a license, a ham radio license?
Not that I know of. The Girl Scouts, and I find the Boy Scouts are a slow process to get working with them. The Girl Scouts, I'll be nice, seem to have a primary focus on established things that they do, and of course the Girl Scout cookies. And the Boy Scouts do a lot of their planning nearly a year ahead of time. But if you have an insider, if you have a ham radio operator within the Boy Scouts in your area or within the Girl Scouts in your area, it does help. But it's been hard to crack it. But honest to Pete, with the help of Laura at the park, we're back on the air with them. I think it is February. It's called Thinking Day, World Thinking Day, and it's TDOTA, believe it or not, Thinking Day on the Air. There's a website. It's not ours. I believe this started in Great Britain, and we will be there again in February for that. But that's frankly been harder, you would have not thought that, than the public schools. But hey, I'm still forging ahead.
Well, since you mentioned the public schools, tell me about the work you've done in the public schools to introduce people to ham radio.
Well, I'm not the only one in the club, of course, to have done that. We've had several in the past, and I don't like to use the benchmark of COVID, but COVID will forever be a benchmark in the history of basically the world. Prior to COVID, the club, K4YTZ is the call sign, it's YCARS. York County Amateur Radio Society, they had reached out to some clubs and even began a process to start a radio club at a local school in South Carolina. COVID hits, it falls by the wayside, schools are not open, we all know the story there. So here we come after COVID, and we'd had some local small ham fest, swap meets, tailgates, and John, NJ4Z, had introduced himself to some local folks in Union County, South Carolina. One of the women there is the geometry teacher inside the school. She's interested in ham radio, became a technician, as did her son and a couple of other people on there. So when I met her, I said, we need to talk. So we started talking. We got it set up with the lieutenant colonel of the JROTC there. Drilled down as to how much time we had, what we were going to do, no fire involved, give an overall presentation of what is called What is Ham Radio. 2 back-to-back sessions just about a month ago. A couple of the kids got on the air, and that's how we got into public school, and it's actually growing a bit now since you and I talked previously.
Well, tell me about that. How has it grown?
I've applied for, and I have a club call sign for the school's radio club. We are basically waiting this week to hear back from the principal of that school so we can meet with maintenance people to see where we can set up a rig, if it needs to be portable. We've got club members that are donating what we need as far as an antenna and a mast. And so I'm kind of in a holding pattern at that school. But in the meantime, I visited an established ham radio school, which I would highly, Kevin, encourage you to reach out to this young fella. It is Into FRC, Into Falcon Radio Club. Call sign November 2, Foxtrot Radio Charlie, Cherryville, North Carolina, 4th and 5th graders. And I visited over there Friday. And I've got 9 more grandchildren now because all those kids, yeah, we had a blast over there. And these kids are entering the contacts on QRZ. Their calls on, that's the first time they called CQ. And in doing that, it just sparked, one of the fathers there has sent me a contact for another school in South Carolina to reach out to them. And shortly after that, a club member put me in touch with the STEM instructor at a York Preparatory Academy in Rock Hill. So we're waiting to have a sit down with a couple of teachers there, hopefully the first week of December this year. And in the meantime, 2 of our club members, thank goodness it was Scott, he had tried the school approach prior to COVID, and now he and another club member, we call him the Mighty Minnow, K04MNN, and they approached the entire Fort Mill District 4. And whenever December the 1st is, a couple of us are going to present What is Ham Radio to 20 to 30 STEM instructors, which would encompass a myriad of schools in Fort Mill District of South Carolina. So it just, when the momentum got going, it really got going.
You know, you raised an interesting point. I had asked earlier if any of the girls had gone on to get their license, but it makes sense that if no one in their family has a license and has the equipment, then there's not a lot of incentive to get a license. At that age, you're not going to be going out and buying a rig. So to have that equipment available in the school is just fantastic, and certainly an incentive and motivation to see what your friends are up to get on the air.
Absolutely.
So you've mentioned YCAR's, York County Amateur Radio Society, a couple times, and I know in talking to John Gendron that you guys have something really special there. Tell me about that club and your involvement in it.
I became a ham March or April, I forget when I got licensed, last year, 2021. I needed something other than just depending on cell phone. CB radio, to me, when someone asks what's ham radio, when I talk to the kids, if you start with CB radio, it makes sense to them. So I actually bought a CB radio, couldn't reach anyone, and turned around, bought a 2-way, handy talkie, was advised at the local electronic shop to join a club, found YCARs. I looked online, not a member, but they were having a participation coming out of COVID, if you will. And I said, well, what are we doing? Cleaning up the clubhouse. Well, that's not beneath me. So a non-member went to the clubhouse, and, I got in there with the rest of these guys, met some phenomenal people, from Philip, WM4 or KM4 WLS, the club president, Steve, W3SPC, John, many, many others. And I just had a group of friends, applied, became a member, took the test, ran outside the door, screamed that I passed the technician, went back inside and bombed with the general license. But I got enthusiastic with it for myself. And then as more and more people started opening back up with the regulations on COVID, they had what was called a hobby night at one time, but then there was Open House Wednesday. And Open House Wednesday was typically 6 to 8 p.m. every Wednesday. And we have a gate that locks access to the grounds and then a card access to get into the building. I had been there long enough to have access to it, so I drove 40 minutes up. I'm going to step on toes. 40 minutes to get to the clubhouse. The gate was locked. The doors were unopened. So I sent out this rather stern email, text, something that said the optimum word of open is OPEN. And ever since that day, that clubhouse had been open every Wednesday. It has gone from 6 to 8 p.m. till about 4 to 10:30 p.m. We are there. We're rat chewing. We're building antennas. We've got several fellows that have stopped by that are not even a ham yet, that stopped by there, that have asked me to go out with them for Parks on the Air. We have got a couple of fellows that are not club members, but we're building. The soldering iron is hot. We have projects. We have built stuff. Bring a radio if it's broken, and it has just opened up like a flower blooming in springtime. That to me is the most appealing thing. And when a 15-year-old young man walks in the doors this past Wednesday and made a beeline to me and said, "Miss Vicki, I passed my technician license and I'm going to recoup my granddad's call sign. You know you're doing something right." So, but anyway, that's Wednesday. Wednesdays mean more to me than anything. And we will be there. We'll be there on Wednesday this evening, November, whatever it is, going over things.
Well, I wish I could join you. Unfortunately, I'm in Maine. It seems as though you've taken a lot of different paths in ham radio. I know you're on a net. You do some net activity. You mentioned Parks in the Air. You're into education. Even sounds like you do a lot of homebrew, building antennas. What else are you involved with that I haven't heard about yet?
I learned CW, and I tell you what, ham radio operators, us hams, are missing something with these young kids. Both the Girl Scouts, there were probably 4 Girl Scouts age or grades, maybe 8 through, I think one of them was a college applicant, that are teaching themselves CW. And I'm like, ham radio operators, you need to get in there and help them. They're teaching themselves CW. When I went to the school in Union County, when I took the oscillator that my mentor, Jeff Blythe, KA4 Wild Yellow Chicken, WIC, he gave me an oscillator when I was learning CW, and that I will treasure that forever. And it is one of the props, if you will, that we take to the school. And when I hooked the paddles up to that, a young man named Jackson was teaching himself, he's a 9th grader, CW, and he sat in the hallway. I showed him what to do, and I heard that young man call CQ, 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 DE, and he spelled his name out. And there are kids that are looking for you, ham radio operators. Don't wait for them. They're out there. You've got to reach out there to them. I was so impressed with that. And that's why I said that the youth are missing a lot of guidance, a lot of, that we can teach them things that they'll never learn in a school or college. And the further up they go in age, the wider that gap gets. There's a need for us now. Get out of your comfort zone. I was not comfortable doing this, but it doesn't matter what you think of me. If my intent is proper, then I'm okay with what I'm doing. And I noticed you asked that different variants. I was real busy, real hot and heavy, if you will, on Parks on the Air, because that is, to me, the natural approach once you become a ham. The older guys, they may push back on it, but if you can't get out, if you can't connect with a lot of people, Parks on the Air, there are people that go out in 3 feet of snow, throw up an antenna. You sort of owe it to them to make their efforts worthwhile. Contact them. I didn't even know about the awards until about 4 or 5 months in it, and it blew me away. None of them are on my wall. I don't have a wall of what they call wall of arrogance. I think that it appeals to me if I'm talking to someone and I think it would appeal to them. Do you know what I mean? When you tell someone that I've got a DXCC award for both sideband and CW, and I don't have it for digital. I'm not a digital, but there are people that would get into this, and young people, for the awards, for their certifications. So I have those available if they want to see them, but it's nothing I brag about. my success is what I'm doing now with the young kids, and I can't stop what I'm doing, and I don't want to. Just need some help and more enthusiasm, and we need to get others doing it.
You know, you're even challenging my assumptions. I had thought prior to this conversation that probably kids wouldn't be into Morse code. I mean, I certainly am old enough that Morse code was a necessary step when I got my license, and when I got my advanced license. This is back when I was in high school. You know, if you didn't want to take the time to use Morse code, then you weren't going to be on the air. But I sort of had assumed that people weren't as interested anymore, and I'm glad that you've pointed out that's not the case.
Yeah, one of our club members, Darcy Pop, Kilo 4 Delta Queen Papa, I think, he's our treasurer. He had sent me 2 links, and I use this, and we'll use this when we go to the school district in a couple of weeks. But I got on the oscillator at the school, and I sent CQD, CQD. I sent it again. I says, I want y'all to close your eyes and listen to this. I didn't send it fast, and it was just on the speaker. I said, can you hear it? Just listen to it for a minute. And I sat there and I said, do you hear it's 3 letters. I don't want to know the letters, but that's the letters. Can you hear the pattern? And they said, yes. And I said, well, let me tell you what happened in 1912. Cape Hatteras weather station heard CQD, and it was the North Carolina coast that heard the Titanic calling for a disaster. Cape Hatteras, that's home, guys. That's right here we're in South Carolina, but that's right there. They found the logbook for that in the walls of the weather station there at Cape Hatteras and found the actual entry for CQD from the Titanic. And Darcy sent me the link on that. So when we're talking to the kids, and then as the adults as well, we touch on amateur radio emergency services, which is, to me, is even bigger than all the other aspects of ham radio. And that you kind of started with the Titanic, because what could we do? It was back, 100 plus years ago. What are we going to do? But, help was sent, but we know the loss of life out there. But I just am amazed at that. And there is another one, a jungle, I believe it was in South Africa, and the guerrillas had people that were prisoners for years in the jungles. And there were often, what do you call it, hidden or what do you call it, Kevin, when it's not subversive, but quiet approach to try to rescue people? What's the word I'm looking for?
Covert?
Yes, that's the word. Thank you. There was a covert operation with local military group to try to rescue these folks. And they time and time they failed. They would take soccer balls and float them down the river with notes that would try to say help was on the way, don't give up. They had a local, I forget the name of it, but they had a local rock band create a song, and the NCQ, there were I believe it was 19 words. Or it was a message NCW that was hidden in the percussion of this song to the people that were being held captive, that said 19 have been rescued, do not give up, we're coming. Something to that effect. So when you tell kids that, their mind just opens up to what else could I use this for? And to cheat on a test, but not if your instructor is a ham radio operator. But little approaches like that, to stay abreast of the news that's out there. I just sent in all members to all the club members that said, hey, we're getting involved with the schools. It can't be just a few of us. You guys have ideas. You've got suggestions. I want to hear from you. So I'm hoping this Wednesday at Open House that even though it's the day before Thanksgiving, bring me your ideas, bring me your suggestions. What have you got? I don't care if it's donations. I really want your input on it. So that's for some of these ideas that are coming for the kids and for the instructors.
Vicki, you've told me you're not an educator. You are. You are an educator.
Okay.
Maybe not professionally.
Formal.
Maybe not.
Okay.
Maybe your career wasn't in education, but just these stories
Okay.
you've just shared with everybody, you're an educator, and you're very good at it. We're all lucky to have you.
take it
Certainly,
then.
your kids are lucky to have you. I appreciate you taking your time today.
Absolutely. And I do want you to, Mark Reap is his name. Mark Reap. And if you need me to give you the contact information later, I will. Because he has been contacted by other ham radio clubs and schools to help them get started with other school radio clubs as well. So you're on my list. I'll keep you posted, Kevin, as far as how we do and what we're up to and all that. And I appreciate the opportunity to share this with folks as well.
Well, I appreciate you being here. And I know we're keeping you away from your net, probably Parks on the Air, definitely your grandkids. So I want to get you back to all that. I've been talking to Vicki Carnes, AD3I. We're lucky to have her. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Kevin. You guys have a great day. Happy Thanksgiving. Bye-bye now.
CQ POTA, CQ Parks on the Air. Whiskey 1 Delta Echo Delta.
Kilo Delta 4, Whiskey India.
Kilo Delta 4, Whiskey India 5x9 at Kilo 8291.
Roger. Got you 57 Virginia. Victor Alpha this morning.
Thank you for 57 into Virginia 73. QRZ Whiskey 1 Delta Echo Delta.